All right, so now we're going to do some work with conditionals and De Morgan's law. I have three statements up here. I shot a deer, I processed the deer, I eat the meat, okay? This deer hunting season starting up here pretty soon, and so these three statements kind of go together, and what I have is a conditional that contains a conjunction, okay? So you think about what this conditional says. If I shot a deer, then I process the meat and I eat the meat. Okay, the conjunction is an and, right? So if I shot a deer, then I process the deer and eat the meat. That would be the conditional statement then. Now remember, with the converse occurs if you reverse the order. In other words, you would say, if I process the deer and eat the meat, then I shot a deer. And that would be the converse, okay? The inverse is just negating the two. So you'd say, if I did not shoot a deer, then I did not, or I do not process the deer and eat the meat. All right, so you negate both the antecedent and the consequent. And the contrapositive occurs when you do both. You reverse the order and negate them. Okay, so you'd say, if I did not process the deer and eat the meat, then I did not shoot a deer, right? And so these are our four statements that are variations of the conditional. Now recall that the conditional and the contrapositive are equivalent. That means if the conditional is true, the contrapositive is true, and vice versa. Also note that the converse and the inverse are equivalent, meaning if one is true, the other is true, and if one is false, the other is false. But it is not the case that the conditional and converse are equivalent, right? So there are times where the conditional may be true and the converse may be false, or vice versa, okay? So what I want to do is rewrite each of these using De Morgan's law. And you can see there are some places where we can do that, particularly in the inverse and the contrapositive, okay? So the inverse can be rewritten using De Morgan's law, the first variation here, with the not and the and, right? You change the not of an and to the or of the nots, right? So here I have a not of an and, I change that to the or of the nots. And so I'd say not P implies parenthesis. Now this, the not kind of, you almost think of it distributing like in algebra, right? It goes to both of the, both simple statements there, and you change the and to an or. So it's not Q or not R. Okay. So the inverse is saying, I did not shoot a deer. If I did not shoot a deer, then I either did not process the deer or did not eat the meat. Okay. The contrapositive, in a similar way, if I think about that negation going to both of those parts, it has to flip the sign in some sense, right? So you have to make the and an or. So I would say this is equivalent to not Q or not R, or if not Q or not R, then not P. All right, so those are the equivalent forms using De Morgan's law to rewrite those. And so now let's look at what happens if I were to negate one of these entire statements, okay? And so let's consider the conditional for a moment. If I were to negate the entire conditional statement. Interesting. That's quite a bit going on there, right? Now we've already seen that the negation of a conditional in general, not if P then Q, is equivalent to P and not Q, right? So that's something we've seen in a previous video now. So if I were to apply that same process there, the negation of an if-then is the antecedent and not the consequent. So here I look at the antecedent is P, so this must be equivalent to P and not the consequent. Well, the consequent is Q and R, so it's Q and R, right, rather than just Q. And then the negation of an and, if I go back up to De Morgan's law, is really the or of the negations. And so this is actually also equivalent to P and not Q or not R. Okay. So there's multiple different ways to rewrite the negation of the original conditional based upon De Morgan's law. I could also do something, now this is going to be a bit messy maybe, but we'll try it. Let's try to negate, let's negate the contrapositive. Okay, let's try it. Yeah, I wonder if I need more room here. Let's see. So if I negate the statement right here, and I'm going to go with the, well, should I use that form or should I use that form? That's the question. Well, let's use this form here where the negations are inside the parentheses. So let's go with the negate not Q or not R, then not P. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to negate that thing. Now again, the negation of a conditional is the antecedent and not the consequent. So I want to do the antecedent, which is not Q or not R, and the not the consequent. So it'd be not the consequent, which is not P. Alright, now I do know that a double negative or double negation is actually just P, right? So so what I'm really looking at is not Q or not R and P. So you get one of these two nots and P must actually both occur in order to negate the contrapositive. All right, kind of interesting. So it either have the contrapositive would be equivalent to either I did not process the deer, or I did not eat the meat, and I shot a deer. If that makes sense. Yeah. So it's one of these two along with that one. Is the contrapositive. Okay. Is the negation of the contrapositive. Ooh, I said that wrong. The negation of the contrapositive is to say one of these two did not happen, but this one still did. Okay. Yeah, interesting. So you can kind of see how we can apply these rules now. We can kind of intermingle these three rules along with our double negation at times. And that can help us to simplify or rewrite statements in more clear forms.